do today is really demonstrate the importance of international research and the reach of that international research as part of the World Fest celebrations that we're celebrating in the month of March at the University of Kent. And many of those events that are happening this month are really demonstrating the vibrancy of education research and engagement from across Kent. And for us, it's really essential that we weave into that all the work associated with our research. And so what I wanted to do now is ask Betty Wosner, who's with us, who heads up that research impact team. From your perspective, Betty, what's the aim in creating those videos, or I should say documentaries, in the Kent Discovers series?
Well, the real importance of it for us is really to show how our research is being applied in the real world, and to put a visual reality behind the research, and that's what's really exciting about the films in as a film. But also, we want to bring people closer to the research and give them a better understanding, people outside the university. We are a civic university, and that means that we have a duty to share this. And I think the response has been incredible. We've produced over 12 in the last year and a half or so. And every time we've shown them, we've had incredible responses from the local communities in Canterbury and beyond, as well as internationally. So it's very exciting.
I agree with you. And for me, in my role, it's really important that we have really clear messages that we can take to those audiences that, as you say, local audiences, national audiences and international audiences, because we've got a duty to really communicate how our work is making a difference in those spaces. So you mentioned a little bit about the way in which those videos, those documentaries have been received. Who really is the intended audience for those documentaries that have been created?
Well, they're made in a journalistic style, and they're made to be broadcast on television. And initially, the platform being KMTV was for it to be screened as a television program. So they're aimed at a very, very wide audience, and an audience outside of academia. But the take-up on them is very, very broad. It includes academics, it includes stakeholders that we feature in the film who use the films to show in the development of their work. So in a way, there's professional applications, professional groups that look at it. There's research groups that access it. They are in a very accessible format, so everyone can take something from it.
Can I ask you, Betty, just you mentioned that process of taking the research, lifting it off the page and getting it to a wider audience. What do you think the challenges of that are when we're talking about, serious research and needing to translate that to different audiences?
In terms of the translation, I think that, from a scientific perspective, I think it is digging down when you're dealing with hard sciences, for example, digging down and trying to translate that research. And I think Cam can also corroborate with me how difficult that can be. And you see in the films, we have things like diagrams and little cartoons and things, and that is a real challenge to do that. And KMTV is very good at it. But in addition, the fact that we are in labs, like you see here in Thailand, where the scientists can stand beside them and talk about them, that really made it easier for them rather than just trying to put it onto paper. So actually, for scientists, I think that this type of media, being able to speak and talk with their research in a visual way, really helped to make it easier to translate to a wider audience.
Absolutely. So in terms of me as Dean for Internationalisation, I think, the importance of these videos, these documentaries as communication tools are really to demonstrate not just the international location of much of our research, which is obviously making a difference in the UK nationally, but of course in different countries. But it's also about the reach of our research and how the work we're doing here really how can be kind of translated or generalized in other contexts, which I think is one of the key messages that I'm definitely seeking to take away
and
and
how has
take
that
to our
been for
audience.
you? Has that been?
Yeah.
Have you found it really effective in using
So
it in the international group?
absolutely. So I've found the documentaries particularly useful in that. I mean, I'll give an example of something you've referred to already, the PCV2 vaccine development associated with it, biosciences, and the research linked to Thailand. I have been involved with that project from the beginning, obviously not in the same way as the researchers who are specializing in it, but in terms of connecting colleagues with possible research funding opportunities, and then also tracking the development and communicating the impact and leading that into events also associated with Thailand. And for me then to be able to link that and communicate it through these videos again lifts it off the page in a very important way, and helps us to demonstrate how this important kind of work can really have many more repercussions than the particular focus at present. I mean, there's never been a point in time where vaccine development has been more important, and so clearly this is focused on a different type of vaccine for a different kind of purpose, but the skills in developing these kind of technologies is something that people don't understand necessarily as easily if you're not in that field. And so this, I think, can inspire and also communicate in ways which help bring that research to a much wider audience. So for me, that is really, really essential, and that's just one of the videos as an example.
I know exactly. Yeah, the scope of that is huge, actually, and the effects, and actually seeing where they manufacture the vaccine, the facility that they spent billions on in that collaboration with the project, you actually see physically what it is, and it's awe-inspiring, actually, what they are capable of doing, and that doesn't translate onto paper.
No.
It's really, really good. Yeah.
So Cam,
So,
I know you've been involved with those documentaries, haven't you, on location, and you too, Betty. I think you both had the opportunity to actually go out on location to make the videos. I wonder if you could tell us how important that kind of connection with the research is in terms of making the videos as vibrant and communicative as they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, Anthony. Thanks very much for having me on to talk about this. I think what it comes back to for myself and many of the members of the team when we first started doing these was there can be a myth in academia where academics will just, they'll have their tenure, they'll write their books, they'll do a few lectures every week. But that myth has really and truly been busted, we felt, by being part of this project. We've gone, as you said, we've travelled around the world, covering the amazing work that's being done by academics at the university and those local, national and international implications of it. And all coming from Kent as well, which is just a real pat on the back for everybody involved. Going to locations, it does, as you say, it not only visually, it gives it that colour, and it's more important really for the viewer to show that this is actually what's happening. It's not just something that you might read in a paper or in an article. It's actually visually showing this is how the work is being applied around the world in different fields, and those socio-political, those economic, and those scientific results that have come from that.
Brilliant. I mean, I thought that was really interesting, particularly in the context of the Peru video and Natalia Sobrevilla Perea and her work there, linked to helping the local communities understand the past and translate that into how we navigate, the present times that we're in, and that relation of historical and political importance to contemporary life is something that is very significant, not just in Peru, but also, for our local communities as well. So for me, that was a really powerful message.
Well, that story as well, a lot of it comes down to information and the dissemination of information, so that can properly inform and influence an electorate, and politics as well. That isn't just applied to Peru or the Latin American region itself. That applies to everywhere. We've seen what's happened with the growth of the fake news era, and that doubt about the most basic of facts. And seeing the work that Natalia has done really hammered home to us the importance of that in a country that's still really finding its feet democratically. Even it's had its own. It's had a few issues again with recent elections, and there's been a lot of unrest there politically. And we were there kind of before that most recent period, but obviously it's only 20 years since some of the most brutal times in South American history. So being able to talk about that and show that to our audience here on KMTV, and with the screenings that we've had that have accompanied it to an even wider audience, and showed how what's happening across the world still has implications and effects over here as well.
Absolutely. So I know obviously the documentaries themselves encapsulate a body of work that has been undertaken and kind of describes the research of a particular researcher or a team at the university. But obviously after the dissemination of those documentaries, I understand there's been a number of ripple effects or follow-on impacts which are really important too. Can you give us an insight into what those are, Betty?
Well, I think there's a lot of things about the aims of those videos in engaging stakeholders and building what we call research impact, which means that it actually, the work of our researchers actually leads to some kind of substantial change, whether it be societal, like with Natalia's video, where it really showed how society had changed, how society was changing their views on the historical aspects of their political history, and how their attitudes were shifting as a result of some of the things that Natalia's work brought to the public in Peru. And I think we're trying to always capture that. And one of the illustrations is that these films are actually used in the locations themselves. They're actually translated in the native languages, or they're disseminated in the native languages, and they have huge take up by locally as well, and responsiveness. And we're collecting those responses. We're talking to people in terms of, and we're generating stories about how our research is actually really affecting the world, and the films are a real vehicle for doing that, and it's a real vehicle for cementing those relationships the researchers have with their stakeholders, whether it's institutions like in Natalia's work, or historical things in education, like in Mark Lawrence's work in Mexico, but also from an industrial standpoint and from a commercial standpoint, and from perhaps whether they're lobbying government to make changes. All of the films are a really strong vehicle for building those relationships and getting engagement from those who are involved in applying the research. In addition, I think locally and civically, and in terms of people in the UK, it changes the profile it gives them an idea of what the research can do in the real world. And comments that have come back from audiences are things like, "We didn't realize this was happening at Kent." So because it's, and that I think is so important, that there is so much exciting work and exciting change, and people are now seeing that and will watch the films week on week if we're having screenings because they want to know more about what's happening in Kent. And I think that's important for people who might be coming here to study or otherwise as well. So the effects of the films and building relationships, perhaps building new partnerships as well. It's a real solid way of cementing those relationships.
If I may, Anthony, one of the biggest compliments that we can get on behalf of KMTV and on behalf of the university is when we find out, as Betsy says, if those documentaries or any screening events that we've done, if they then get if they get asked to be used elsewhere. We had with the Mexico documentary with Dr. Mark Lawrence looking at a particularly bloody chapter in Mexican history. The Mexican embassy in London have asked if that is something that could be that they could have access to and play in the embassy. We've had you're talking about PCV2. We've recently had a screening in Thai for that, and that had individuals like Yong Yuthawong, who is the former Deputy Prime Minister and works at Biotech, and that's being used there as part of disseminating the message of what they're trying to do. We've had more recently as well, we've had a couple of virtual events with Luis Esteva from the law school, and he said that the event that we did for them, talking about a study that him and colleagues across the UK and Colombia have done into informal workers and how they're treated, how they've been treated during the COVID-19 pandemic. The putting on that event got seen by someone from the Department of Statistics in Colombia, who now are bringing in Luis and his group to help with policy making. So it's when you hear these stories of how the work has gone on and had, again, those wider implications, that's the whole point of what we're trying to do. And it again, is really good commendations for us at the station, but more importantly for the university and the civic work that the university is doing.
Absolutely. So it's important that these documentaries are not an end point, but actually an opportunity for further interaction and development of the research which they showcase. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. So obviously we're in a situation at the moment in the UK and across the world which is somewhat unprecedented with the global pandemic, but I understand that hasn't stopped KMTV and the University of Kent in their mission to continue to communicate our researchers as innovatively and creatively as possible during this period. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about what you've achieved or how you've got around some of the restrictions at the moment to keep the show on the road.
Yeah, quite right. I mean, we've recently just celebrated the first year of the 1 year anniversary of the first national lockdown, and it has been a really challenging time for everyone throughout the creative industries and throughout the media. Everyone has had to adapt and come up with ways to continue operations, and KMTV is no exception as well. We've right at the start, when the working from home became law, and we didn't make that stop us, even with the news program with Kent Tonight, which goes out every weeknight, in which we want to inform and educate the people of Kent about what goes on, what's going on in the county. We upped sticks out from the studio where I'm sitting in now, and we took it in turns with the presenters presenting from their homes. Mark, who runs our technical side, he set up a makeshift gallery in his kitchen to keep it going. It's so important is keeping people informed and educated about what's going on, that we were able to keep those operations going. And likewise with the films and the work that we've been doing with the international side of things, that also kept going as well. We had those international screenings and those virtual panel events, much like we're having now that Betsy spoke about, with all of the various films. And panels from all around the world tuning in for that. And we've also kept the films going as well. We've done it all socially distanced, keeping all COVID precautions in place. We've worked with Dr. Lois Lee from from religious studies, looking at her work on atheism, and my colleague Isabel has worked on a documentary with John Dickinson about asthma and how the impact that has on athletes, and the work that has, and the impact that has had on sports teams from across different disciplines. And like I said, we've been following all COVID precautions. We've had to be really creative with certain shots. You know, you saw in the Peru film, for example, there were scenes of a conference and big crowd gatherings. We can't have those, so we have to be really creative with the footage that we use and the way that we shoot interviews. But we still managed to keep going throughout it, and that's really testament to everybody on the team, and everybody at the university being really understanding and being willing to adapt as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what it's demonstrated is that you can be creative, but in new ways. And as with all aspects of the pandemic, there are going to be residual benefits as to how we integrate our standard approaches and systems with that new technology and new creativity going forward. And I think your newest footage and documentaries demonstrate that. Sorry, Betty, I interrupted you.
I was just going to say, you know, the whole virtual dissemination of the films or the panel discussion. There was one event that we did live, which was the Jane Austen Kept Crafting Through COVID, which was, you know, an international group talking together about their projects in embroidery, and it was a wonderful experience to do a sort of live virtual recorded alongside a film that was also recorded during the pandemic. And it was a really good experience, and it was interactive and socially distanced. And I just wanted to say that the new types of platforms really brought something new to how people engage with the media and the research. So it wasn't just showing people; it was involving people.
Absolutely, I think that's what the kind of technology revolution through the pandemic has really brought to us, hasn't it? This accessibility of technology and ways to bring people together actually more easily in some respects, irrespective of where they're located in the country or around the world. Brilliant. So we've talked a bit already about some of the videos that have international impact and particularly feature international locations. What I'm interested in now is really some of those other videos which hit the nail on the head in the way that I described earlier, in terms of they're not necessarily about research which is located internationally, but about research which has the solution to problems which are potentially internationally translatable, although they may be initially being practiced in the UK. And one of the documentaries which I think does that so very well is the one led by Henrik Schoenfeldt, focusing on the renovations of the Palace of Westminster. And for me, that's such an important development of how we explore the intricacies and the challenges presented by historical structures and architecture, and then how we can use that to then find new solutions which allow us to update buildings into a contemporary manner, and also then inform opportunities for sustainable architectural development that may be translatable across practices in the UK in other ways, but perhaps more broadly across the world. And really to see such pioneering activity led by Heinrich in that documentary shows us, you know, how creative our researchers can be and how that can have solutions which are much more broadly translatable. Were you involved in making that video as well, both of you, that documentary?
Yes, we were. Were you? Yeah, you were on that too, Ken, weren't you? Yes.
Yeah, that was the pilot. That was our pilot one for the whole series. That was the first one that we worked from.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
his work is so exciting as it is, but then to be able to manifest it visually like that, um, and also to talk to the people, to architects, and have feedback from everyone involved in that project or beyond, the Historical Building Society, and then also learn how that work, how his work is going internationally, in Middle Eastern countries, especially, and using his approaches and using um, his his sustainable models in their own historic buildings is really really interesting. And the film was the way that we were able to capture that or even know that it existed. And it's
I think it's
brilliant.
also
Yeah.
inspirational for people to see how research can lead to such, important solutions, and it's also demonstrating to us how there are so many different layers of expertise involved in a particular practice. So you can, for example,
Yes.
see the technological dimension of architecture and planning, which perhaps people, who are not associated with that field are not aware of, and how how information technology is so closely
Yeah.
bound to success in that field.
Really,
And it also shows,
the 3D modeling of the building,
yeah,
that was one of the major aspects that you could see all the gapes and the holes and all in the architecture, which was something they couldn't do before. There you go.
absolutely, yeah. And so, how they can reveal those spaces in the building which are for ventilation, which now need to be reused for new technologies as they update the building for the modern world. And you wouldn't imagine how on earth you could find that solution. And what Henrik does is really show us how those technologies come to play and how that is not only useful for that particular structure, but for other opportunities to do the same kind of thing in other locations, as you said, in structures in the Middle East, as well as within the UK. And I think it's inspirational for viewers, I hope, of different ages to see the practical implications of the work of our researchers, which we hope will then inspire young people to forge a career in academia and research. Because another key communication of that research is how you can, apply study to real life problems in the world.
The possibilities.
Mm,
Who knew that this is what you could do?
exactly,
You became a
absolutely.
biochemist, or you became yeah, it's amazing.
And that's
Brilliant.
certainly with all the films, that's been one of, at some point in the films, that's been one of the key aspects that we've wanted to get across. I think with all the academics that we have been dealing with, as you hopefully see in the films, is the passion really is contagious from what they are, what they're trying to do, and how they're able to explain that, and how that is meant to inspire. Talk about Henrik just now. Obviously, that work has gone on and is helping fellow researchers in Sudan and in Oman, is in just some of those places, and how what he's done with looking at old buildings and trying to reshape them so that they still retain that, the reason why we all love them, but also so that they're carbon neutral and they're more environmentally friendly, and how that is now affecting other countries elsewhere. We have we did a documentary about the Mary Rose and how a team of chemists have helped to develop the technology to make sure it doesn't just crumble into dust, that it can keep going and inspire young people for ages to go and see it in person in the museum. And one of the academics that we spoke to on that, Professor Eleanor Schofield, mentions in the film how keen she is to show the importance of STEM subjects, that it's not just sitting in a classroom doing formulas, that it has those real world implications. And she's especially passionate about inspiring women to go into STEM. That's obviously a headline that is really quite it has been in the press for many years about a lack of women in STEM, and hopefully seeing the work that she does in this documentary will go some way to changing that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
she's head of conservation, so she is head of conservation at the Mary Rose, and she has this incredible job, and she's a chemist, so very exciting. It's very interesting. Nobody thinks that, of that trajectory when you take on a degree like that. So,
but it's good to make that bridge, and I think bridges are a kind of key dimension of the documentaries and our overall mission through communicating our research impact, in that we want to make sure that the wider audiences, the wider community is aware of the impact, and also bring people to research, and because they can see the exciting opportunities that yields. And I think that is really what we're all about at the University of Kent. I want to say thank you very much to both of you for talking to me today. It's been really insightful for me, and also a great opportunity to learn more about your involvement in making the Kent Discovers series, and looking forward to seeing more of those videos coming through in the future, and to new exciting ways of getting the message out. I know we've got another clip of some of those documentaries to show you at this point as we end the session today, which hopefully will give you a bit of a deeper insight into some of the work that we've been discussing today. Thank you for listening. It's been great to share all of this with you, and we hope you were able to learn something from it and discover more about the University of Kent. Thanks, Betty. Thanks, Cam.
Thanks for having us on.
Brilliant.
Records tend to be biased towards the church or the state, but part of this hope for a better understanding is opening a museum in Guadalupe, Zacatecas. My research, along with the help of local people, will spread understanding to a town that was central in the conflict. We got special access to a rare archive which will help us expand our knowledge and inform people here of what their ancestors went through.
Sigue siendo muy complicado hablar del conflicto religioso en Zacatecas, tanto por el Estado como por la Iglesia. Creo que a casi 100 años del inicio podemos estar en condiciones de entablar nuevas perspectivas que hablen de los dos lados y compaginarlas en un solo proyecto. Y sobre todo que tiene un beneficio a la población para entender de mejor manera cómo fue el conflicto, que nos permite entender que ni el Estado actuó de una manera de solamente ir hacia los católicos, como que la Iglesia tampoco se sublevó por nada. Entonces creo que la apertura de archivos a finales del siglo XX, los archivos judiciales, nos va a permitir tener una mejor visión de la situación. Sobre todo porque los archivos del gobierno del Estado sufrieron una inundación, o algunos fueron quemados, también algunos municipales.
I believe that in the case of Peru, but everywhere as well, it is very important to know what has happened in the past so that you have a real assessment of the situation. The current things that are happening always have an origin in what's come before.
LUN es un espacio de memoria nacional que básicamente nos ayuda a reflexionar sobre el periodo de violencia que vivió el país en los años 80 a 2000. Aquí se hacen actividades también pedagógicas, culturales, también se promueve el tema de la investigación académica. Entonces es por eso que incluso en el Ministerio de Cultura se hace esta diferenciación. No estamos ni siquiera propiamente no estamos ni siquiera en la categoría de museo, sino es por eso que se ha creado especialmente para este espacio la denominación del lugar, ¿no?
โครงการนี้เป็นความร่วมมือระหว่างนักวิจัยจากไทยและสหราชอาณาจักรเพื่อพัฒนากระบวนการให้ไทยสามารถผลิตวัคซีนสัตว์เองได้ในปริมาณมากนำโดยศาสตราจารย์คอลิน โรบินสันและดร. แอลิสัน วอลเทอร์สจากมหาวิทยาลัยเคนต์
The idea behind this project is that we're going to produce recombinant proteins that are used as animal vaccines.
Recombinant protein is a protein from one organism that's produced in another. So, for example, we're going to take a protein from a virus that infects pigs and we're going to get E. coli to make it. So we're kind of using E. coli as a factory to make lots and lots of this foreign protein that it doesn't normally make, that we can then purify, extract from the E. coli in large amounts and then use as the vaccine that we need for the pigs.
The idea in a nutshell is that we perfect a system at small scale and then the Thais use that system and scale it up to 500 litre capacity. And then they're in a position to produce their own vaccines. Animal vaccines have to be cheap or the farmers can't afford to use them and they won't use them. So this is all about making the process efficient so that the Thai companies can market this more cheaply than importing a vaccine from Europe or the United States.
การที่ไทยสามารถผลิตวัคซีนสัตว์ได้เองจะไม่เพียงช่วยเหลืออุตสาหกรรมอาหารและเกษตรกรรมในประเทศแต่จะส่งผลกระทบในทางบวกกับตลาดวัคซีนในเอเชียตะวันออกเฉียงใต้